Unlocking the Bible video series part 3, In the Beginning. Okay, I'm going to do this video series on the first few chapters of Genesis and creation. But I'm not going to start in the book of Genesis, even though that would seem like the most logical place to start, because there are other couple portions of the Bible that give us a little bit more of the backstory. Most of us do know the first verse of Genesis: in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. But there are other contextual verses in the Bible that give us a little bit more illumination into what's going on that I think are important for us to understand what's happening in the first few chapters of Genesis. So I'm going to start out here in the New Testament in the book of John, and this is John 1:1, and I'll go ahead and read this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God, and all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Now, that light is Christ. That light is Jesus. If we continue on down here a little further, you'll see it talks about John the Baptist, who is an important character from the New Testament. It says, there was a man who was sent from God, whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light. This is skipping well ahead into history, into the time of Jesus, but that first verse we talked about, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, that goes all the way back to the beginning of time. So we're skipping ahead now to the time of John the Baptist here, picking up again at verse John 1:6. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might believe. He was not the light, but he was sent to bear witness of that light. That light, that was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, but the world knew him not. Again, this is talking about Jesus. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And, okay, now we get into the part that talks about Jesus coming incarnate. And the Word was made flesh, and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, and the glory as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bare witness of him, and cried, saying, This was he whom I spoke, that he cometh after me, and is preferred before me, for he was before me. Meaning Jesus goes all the way back to the very beginning. Even in Genesis 1:1, Jesus is the light, Christ is the light that shineth into the world. So it's important to understand that part when we begin going back all the way to the first chapter of Genesis. I'll go there right now so you can kind of see that. Just one second here. Okay. Same kind of start for the book of John as we have in Genesis here. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, this is a physical representation of the creation of light, the first day of creation, but it's also, keep in mind, going back to the words from John, that Christ is the light of the world. He was with God, and he was God in the very beginning. And he became incarnate, and then he shined into the darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not. Now, a lot of people will point out, boy, God created light on the first day, but then he created the sun later on down here in the fourth day. Well, keep in mind, again, the light, the first light that shined in the world was the light of Christ, the glory of God, and the darkness comprehended it not. There is a difference between the physical light produced by the sun and the light of the glory of God that enters into the darkness listed here in Genesis 1:1, and you have to understand the verse in John before you really get that. Now, I believe that there is a physical light to that as well, a physical aspect to it in terms of the 6 days of creation in Genesis, but without understanding the John 1:1, I don't think you can understand fully Genesis 1:1, because you will think it's only the physical light, only the aspect of, like the solar day, the solar sun. But there's more going on here than just that. So that's the important context I want to give you here for that. The other verse I want to go to is Proverbs 8. Let me go ahead and go there now. And a lot of people don't really know about this or think about this one when they study the Bible, but this is an important verse for creation here. Now, what's going on in the book of Proverbs is this is in the time of Solomon. And Solomon is writing this book basically to his son to teach him wisdom. And one of the things he's teaching him in terms of wisdom is in terms of choosing a wife. He's saying stay away from a wayward woman, the adulterous woman, but take a wife that is wisdom, a virtuous woman. And the prophetic examples that are tied into this scripture are, even though they're emblematic, comparing, contrasting these two types of different women, but they're also showing prophetic allusions or alliteration back to the time of creation, back to the Spirit of God, the Spirit of wisdom. It's not just talking about a physical woman, but there's more going on here as you read the text. So I'll go ahead and read it, and you should be able to pick up on that. So I'm going to start in Proverbs verse 8:22, and this is after the Spirit of wisdom has been speaking. Again, anthropomorphized as a woman that Solomon would like his son, the type of woman that Solomon would like his son to take for a wife. But again, wisdom is also speaking prophetically here. So here's the Spirit of wisdom, and it says, in picking it up in verse 22, it says, "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his way, before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water. Before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. While as yet he had not made the earth, nor the fields, nor the highest part of the dust of the world. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the depth. When he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep. When he gave the sea his decree that the water should not pass his commandment, when he appointed the foundations of the earth. Then I was by him, as one brought up with him, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. Rejoicing in the habitable parts of his earth, and my delights were with the sons of men. Now therefore hearken unto me, O ye children, for blessed are they that keep my ways. Hear my instruction and be wise, and refuse not. Blessed is the man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors. For whoso findeth me findeth life, and shall obtain the favor of the Lord. But he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death." So we find some interesting information here. The Spirit of wisdom talking, but referring to a time from before the foundation of the earth. Before God created the heavens and the earth. It says, "The Lord possessed me in the beginnings of his way, before his works of old. I was set up from everlasting, from the beginning, or ever the earth was. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills were brought forth." So we're going back to a time even a little bit earlier than the beginning of Genesis, where it says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." We're talking like eternally from the very beginning. But of course, this is the Spirit of prophecy and the Spirit of God talking, and God is everlasting from even before the creation of the heavens and the earth. There's some debates about this in terms of the Trinity, because some people would raise questions as to, well, is the Spirit of God a woman? Well, it's presented in this verse as a woman, but that's for another video to discuss. And it's talking about the Spirit of wisdom, which is one of the manifest spirits of God, because this says there are 7 spirits of God. Again, that's a more complex theological issue, which isn't really the subject of this particular video, and I can get into another one. But the purpose that I want to talk about this video was that wisdom precedes the creation of the heavens and the earth. Now, if we look at the order of things here, God said, "Let there be light." First, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form or void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And then God said, "Let there be light." So light is made manifest into the world after the creation of the heavens and the earth. Before the creations of the heaven and the earth, we have wisdom. And it also says that in the beginning, in 1 John 1:1, it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Then the Word was shine as light into the darkness. Okay. So again, Christ was with God in the beginning, but the light didn't shine into the darkness until a little further on, because you have the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without form and void. The earth became dark after the fact. So before you have the creation of the heavens and the earth, you have the existence of God. You have God the Son, who is Jesus Christ, who is the Word. You have the Holy Spirit, and one of the manifestations here presented is the Spirit of wisdom. And then you have the God the Father, who creates the heaven and the earth. So these are three verses that give you the examples of the Trinity. Okay. Now again, I know that wisdom is presented here as a female, and I don't want to get into a debate about whether or not there's an aspect of the Holy Spirit that is female, or that's again a debate for another discussion. We can talk about that. But the point I want to make here is that you can see that the Trinity, the existence of God, is there before the creation, before heaven and earth. And you have all three elements there. You have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So that's the important point I want to make, that they are pre-existing, and they are there before the establishment of the heavens and the earth. Now, the other important verse that I want to bring out here is, it says that in Proverbs 8:27, when he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the depth. When he established the clouds above, and he strengthened the fountains of the deep. When he gave the sea his decree, and the waters shall not pass his commandment, when he appointed the foundations of the earth. Then I was by him as one brought up with him, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. Now the interesting conjecture of this particular context of this particular verse here gives kind of an allusion back to Adam, if you will, that Eve was taken out of his side and then brought forth to him, but that God made man male and female, that they were one flesh, and then God took Eve out of the side of Adam. In the same way here, wisdom is speaking. She's saying, and then I was by him as one brought up with him, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. The allusion here is one of a husband and wife type situation. So the point being that if we look at the example back in Adam, that Adam and Eve were essentially the same person at one point, but that Eve was taken out of Adam's side. And then we also go forward to the book of John 1:1, where it says that God, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. We can see, looking again at the Holy Spirit, you have God the Father, the Creator, but that God the Father, the Holy Spirit, and God the Son are all one. Three manifestations, but they're all God. So not only do we have the example of the Trinity, but we show the example that before the creation, the Trinity existed as one God, manifest in three different persons, but still one God. And again, there are scriptures. Let me show you real quick the seven spirits. And so we have here in Revelation 1:4, John is speaking to the churches that are in Asia, specifically in Turkey. And it says, John, to the seven churches which are in Asia, grace be unto you, and peace from him which is, and which was, and which is to come, and from the seven spirits which are before his throne. So there's seven manifestations of the Spirit of God, and I'll show you what those are in just one second here. Now here's a prophecy from the book of Isaiah that harkens back to several hundred years before Christ, and it's a prophecy of the coming Messiah. It's talking about Jesus, and it says, there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. That prophecy of the branch is very important in another prophecy. And it says, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, and the Spirit of wisdom, and the Spirit of understanding, and the Spirit of counsel, and might, and the Spirit of knowledge, and of fear of the Lord. So let's count them up here. The Spirit of, number one, the Lord, the Spirit of wisdom. Now, if you remember what we were just reading in Proverbs chapter 8, that was the Spirit of wisdom that was speaking. The third one here, understanding. The fourth, the Spirit of counsel. The fifth, might. The sixth, the Spirit of knowledge. And the seventh, of the fear of the Lord. So here we have seven manifestations of the Spirit. the ultimate Spirit of God that will rest upon him. And of course, if we read in the New Testament, we read about the Spirit coming down and resting upon Jesus in the form of a dove at the time of his baptism. And it says, and shall make of him quick understanding in the fear of the Lord, and shall not judge after the sight of and he shall not judge after the sight of the eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove the equity of the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked, excuse me, and righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. Messianic prophecy talking about Jesus. Some of these items here, I believe, are in particular referring to not only this first coming, but the second coming. But certainly, Jesus, he judged the poor and the meek and so forth, not after the way that men would judge, which is after the vision of the eyes and the hearing of their ears. He judged them after with quick understanding and after the fear of the Lord. Certainly a description of the ministry of Jesus. So, anyways, you can see the example of the manifestations of the seven spirits here, but wisdom in particular, speaking in Proverbs 8, and it's characterized as a female. But we can debate about that because in the Hebrew language, certain words are given feminine aspect and certain words are given masculine aspect, and it doesn't matter if they're an actual human object with, if they're male or female. They could be talking like, for example, a table, but they would characterize it as a female, the same way you would do a ship. Like you would call a ship a female. That doesn't mean that the ship is actually a female, but that there's something in the language in Hebrew that they will give a female or a male characteristic to all their words. But the problem, of course, in Proverbs is that it goes beyond just the word giving it a male or female aspect. It actually presents the whole idea of wisdom being a virtuous woman. But again, that's a debate for another discussion, whether or not there's a feminine aspect to the Spirit of God. But the point I want to make here, again, going back to the original understanding of creation, is that God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit are all one. They're all a Trinity, and they're all there in the beginning before God created the heavens and the earth. Now, the other thing I want to bring up, I'm going to go back to it real quick here. Back in Proverbs chapter 8, it says a curious line, a curious verse here. It says that, one second here. Okay. When in verse 27 it says, when he prepared the heavens, I was there, when he set a compass upon the face of the depth. So let's go to Genesis 1:1 and see what we're talking about here. When he prepared the heavens, I was there, when he set a compass upon the face of the depth. So in the beginning, we know in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So wisdom was there before God created the heavens, or before he put a compass on the face of the depth. So the heavens, in this case, the Spirit of God is hovering, according to this description in Genesis, over the face of the waters. So when God first created the heavens and the earth, he describes it as waters. Okay? And the heavens, he describes it as the abode of the Spirit that's hovering over the face of the waters. All right? And then God spoke and said, let there be light. So in the beginning, the earth was without form or void, darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now we just read in Proverbs that God set his compass upon the waters, which is kind of interesting. Because what is a compass exactly? Well, let's take a look here. Okay, this is a compass. It's used, obviously you've seen this before, but it's used in architecture and technical drawing, basically for the purpose of drawing curved lines and arcs. Not straight lines, not squares, but when you got to do a curve or a bow and you need a perfect measurement, you can use a compass for that purpose. Now that's opposed to a square, which is often used with a compass, which you can see here. The purpose of a square is to be able to draw straight lines and straight angles, as opposed to curved lines and curved angles that you draw with a compass. So in designing and planning architecture, if you're going to build something, two basic elemental tools that you would need in order to be able to plan things out. You have a compass and you have a square. Those are the two things. So Proverbs is talking about a tool for designing, if you will, for preparing the planning of something you're going to build, and the tool it's referring to is a compass, talking about circular curved lines planning in that respect, which is interesting because it already from the beginning is alluding to the circular nature of the earth and the world he's going to create. Okay, before I talk about the compass though, which is a very important uh, topic that I want to discuss, I first want to get into the Hebrew words and letters for the first verses of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The Hebrew word for in the beginning is Bereshit, and it's actually the name of the book of Genesis in Hebrew, Bereshit, because they take the first word. In Hebrew, there are for the most part, no vowels. The words are made up of, in ancient Hebrew, they're made up of consonants, and you kind of have to guess the vowels. There are some letters that kind of act as vowels sometimes, such as A or Aleph in Hebrew, or V, Vav sometimes, but for the most part, they just use consonants. So the word Bereshit in Hebrew is made up of 6 different Hebrew letters. The first is, in English would be B, but in Hebrew it's Bet. The second is R, in English would be Resh. The third is Aleph, or the letter A. The fourth is Shin, or S in English. The fifth is Yod, or the letter Y in English. And the last one is Tav, which is a T in English. And each of these letters in the word Bereshit go back to Egyptian hieroglyphs. Actually, all the alphabetic languages in the West, even though some alphabets will have more letters than others or less, they all harken back to a common ancestry going back to Egypt in the Egyptian hieroglyphs. That's where our writing originally comes from in the alphabetic languages. That's different than, say, the Chinese, which have pictographic or logographic languages where their letters are devised from little pictures or little images. Ours go back to Egyptian hieroglyphs, which in a sense, the Egyptian hieroglyphs even are little pictures or little images. And I'll give you an example of that now. The B, for example, in Bereshit, that comes from an Egyptian hieroglyph, Bet, which is an ancient Hebrew name for house. In fact, even today, the word for house is Beth. So, for example, the town of Bethlehem, Lehem meaning bread, Beth meaning house, the name of the town of Bethlehem is house of bread. That's where the word Beth comes from. So each of these letters have different meanings in the Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, in the case of how they originally looked before we got the kind of the block letters that we so commonly see today when we look at Hebrew. Ancient Hebrew looked a lot more like the original Egyptian hieroglyphs than they did the block letters you would see today in Hebrew. So, for example, today in Hebrew, we might see that would be a bet, okay? And yod, for example, in Hebrew, that would be just a little mark here like this. That would be a yod, okay? In ancient Hebrew, the letters and the hieroglyphs that they came from were different from these block form letters that we see in Hebrew today. So, for example, in the case of Bet, the original ancient Hebrew version looks like this. Okay, and from that over time developed into this. Well, what that was is it was representation of a house. So you can kind of see the door here. You see the walls. Okay, and that's from an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph for a house. Again, house Beth, Bethlehem. That's where that comes from. So let's take the first 2 letters here. Ra, or Resh, which is actually this whole area here, but the letter itself is called Resh. That came from an Egyptian pictograph that looked kind of like this. It was kind of, it was a head, basically. A human head is what it was supposed to be. So the first line of Genesis, the first word is Bereshit. In Hebrew it's Bereshit, bara, Elohim et hashamayim v'ha'et ha'aretz. So the Bereshit is in the beginning. The next word that comes in line is bara, which is the same first three letters as in Bereshit, but it has a different meaning. Bara means to create. Bereshit means in the beginning. The root word, again, be is a prefix, means in. The root word, beginning, is the rashit, and that's different from the word bara, which is B-R-A, because B-R-A is its own word, to create, whereas in Bereshit, the B is a prefix and the rashit is its own word, okay? But here's the kind of cool thing, and I'll show you to compare the two. I'm going to add the bara just so you can see it. The next word after Bereshit is bara. Oops, sorry, I don't know why it's adding in here. Hold on a second. So, okay. So if be is by itself added to the front of a word, that's a prefix that means in. It's not the case here. Bara is its own word, which means to create. So Bereshit means be in Rashit, the beginning. Rasheth is the root word. So Bereshit, in the beginning. Bara, created, create. Okay. In Hebrew, the ordering of the words is a little bit different. So the next word is Elohim, which is God. Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, created God, saying that God created. That's we'd say in English. In the beginning, God created. In Hebrew, the verb part comes before the noun part, which is God. So Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, created God, or in the beginning, God created. Okay. Going back to what I was talking about here, we've got the letter B is a bet, a house. In ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, it stands for a house. The letter R, resh, if we look in ancient Hebrew, the word ra means, like this, ra, which is resh aleph, that means to lay waste or to destroy something, to make empty, to make void. That's what the word ra means. It also can mean a sun or an eye in ancient Egyptian, but ra, it means to lay waste or destroy. Ba, house, also means, in a sense, a body. If you think the word body, the core there being ba, okay? So we have a body of something here, and we have to lay waste or destroy, to make empty or void, okay? And together we have create, we have bara. So looking at the word for create here, okay? It's the be and then the word ra, which is, so you have create a body, and then you have empty and void. Now, what's the first verse of Genesis? Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And what does the next line say? And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So look what you have in the very first letters of Genesis here. You have a body that's created, but it's empty and void. It has a container, an outside, to separate, and a body basically separates, it's an entity, it's a volume, it separates what's outside from what's inside. It's a border, if you will. So we have an outside body, and then we have an inside, it's void, it's empty. Bara, a body, again, a house, container, okay? But then ra, which is to make void or empty. Bereshit, so you can see the alliteration that's coming in here already in the first few letters. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'ha'et ha'aretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. There's a lot more that's contained within these letters as we move on here. Okay. The aleph, that's an interesting, the letter A, for example. If you look how it works here, there's an interesting text. It's an apocryphal text, but it talks about, I believe it's the infancy narrative of Jesus. Hang on one second here. Now this particular scripture, this comes from the infancy gospel, which is a Gnostic text. It's considered a heresy in the Christian tradition. and that's a debatable point as well, because Gnosticism certainly was considered a heresy. But there's some interesting aspects of this text that I found intriguing. It says, and Jesus is being taught about the alphabet. But he's teaching his teacher more about the alphabet than the teacher is trying to teach him. And this is when Jesus is a kid. And this is not found in the Bible. This is extra biblical. But he said, and he told him all the letters from alpha even to omega clearly. Alpha, that's the Greek version, A to Z basically, except omega is the last letter in the Greek alphabet, and with much questioning. But Jesus looked upon Zacchaeus, the teacher, and saith unto him, Thou knowest not the alpha according to its nature? How canst thou teach others the beta? Bet, the letter B. Thou hypocrite, first, if thou knowest it, teach the alpha, and then will believe thee concerning the beta. Then began he to confound the mouth of the teacher concerning the first letter, and he could not prevail to answer him, and the hearing of many of the young child saith to Zacchaeus, Hear, O teacher, the ordinance of the first letter, and pay heed to this, how that it hath, and then this part is lost in history, it says. What follows is really unintelligible in this and in all parallel text. A literal version would run something like this. How is it, how that it hath lines, and a middle mark, which thou seest, common to both, going apart, coming together, raising up on high, dancing, and then that word is lost, of three signs, like in kind, a corrupt, this word's corrupt as well, balancing and equal in measure. Thou hast the rules of the alpha. What's he talking about? He's actually talking about the design of the letter A, which is designed almost like a compass. But he's talking about how it has two legs, how it's connected together. Here, let me go back to the example here. How it raises up on high, how it's got two legs, how it's connected together, dancing and so forth. Almost shaped, if you will, like an example of a compass. But here's the point I want to make. The letter A, which is the very first letter, it starts out with one point, and then it divides into two aspects, but yet the two aspects are completely connected. They're the same. And it magnifies into a larger object below, which is a wider point division. Even though it's the same thing, it starts with this one point, spreading out into a larger one, if you will. A little hard to explain, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because if we look at the aspect of creation, okay, from a standpoint of a compass, you start out with a compass on a simple little point, and then you would place your compass on the point, and then from there you can spin it, and you can draw a perfect circle around your pivot point where you're spinning. What's interesting about that is if the compass represents the letter A, okay, that's the alpha, the starting point, the beginning, and then the circle that you're able to draw is the omega, the ending point, the alpha and the omega. Just kind of an interesting observation. I'm not saying that this is biblical, but I do find it very, very curious. Also, you're starting from a small point, okay, like this, and then from that you're able to get a big point. And the big point is interesting because it has a body as an outside, and inside it's void, it's empty. There's nothing in there. So you're able to start with basically a unity, a point of unity, and you're able to separate it into two items. That part of it that is something, the outside body part, the edge, and the inside part, which is nothing, which is void. So let me do this here. Well, first I want to say something. Now, that's not to say that I believe in Gnosticism, because I don't. And I believe that for the most part the Gnostic texts, particularly certain texts like the Nag Hammadi codexes and so forth, are heretical in nature. But having said that, I believe that there are several Christian traditions and information that's handed down to us throughout history that kind of got mixed up in the culture of the day, and there are certain aspects in the way that they thought in those days that may have gotten lost in history. This may be one of those items. Not Gnosticism overall, but possibly some of the information contained in or the stories about Jesus might have been mixed in with some of those other texts, and because they were mixed in with Gnostic texts, we may have lost some of that information throughout history. So I'm merely examining this as an extra biblical point, but it does seem curious that all this stuff works out so well. So anyways, getting back to my original discussion here. So if we start with an empty universe, if you will, completely blank and void, we need to make, if you look at the way that the wording is in Genesis, you have, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. You have a dichotomy between two different elements, heavens and earth. And then the next dichotomy comes in and God said, let there be light, and God separated the light from the darkness. Again, light and darkness separate. You always have this juxtaposition between two different elements. But in the case of God, the Alpha and the Omega, so forth, God is a Trinity. God is one, okay, yet he has different manifestations, all right? But yet they are connected together. They're all the same thing. So the Holy Spirit is God. You have God the Father, God the Son, God the Father, God the Son. They're all one thing, okay? In the same way, you have the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. They're all one thing, okay? If you were going to take a compass, as we read in Proverbs, and spin it upon the depth representing the emptiness, the void, the darkness of nothing, okay? You would first have to have a point to spin it on. Wherever you start the compass, you're starting on a point somewhere. And that point is a singularity, and then as you create the compass, you're going to create a body, okay? So getting back to what I was saying in Proverbs 8, we have an example of the start of creation, the architecture of creation, if you will, that's kind of hidden within the text, in my opinion. So, but before you can have a point, before you have this dichotomy between darkness and light, between the heavens and the earth, you have to have a starting point, and the starting point obviously is God. In the beginning, God. God created the heavens and the earth. God created light. God separated the light from the darkness, and so forth. So you have to have a single starting point to begin with. But in the case of the universe, the empty universe, if God's going to place his compass upon the depths, where is the foundation point, the starting point, where God places his compass? Okay, you need to have a point in the empty void. So hang on one second. So God created the universe out of nothing. But nothing is an interesting logical term. If we look at the word nothing, for example, in order to have a concept of anything, you have to have that dichotomy. You have to have, the polar opposite, because one thing will describe another. In the case of nothing, even nothing makes no sense unless there's something. Okay, we can even divide the word down the middle here. All right, a thing would be the dichotomy to not a thing, nothing, no. Okay. Without this dichotomy, without one describing the other, the existence is meaningless. The existence doesn't happen, if you will. Everything that God did in terms of creation, he separated it between the Ba and the Ra. The things that are substantive and its polar opposite, the void. Another way to think of this, if we had nothing, one representation is the number 0, nothing, emptiness, void. Okay, even the number 0 has an outer body and an inner void. If we couldn't make that distinction, we wouldn't be able to even create the notation for the letters for the number 0. So everything, all of our understanding requires us to have some sort of contrast. Without that contrast, we cannot understand anything. And that's why, for us, ultimately, God is unknowable. And that's in the Bible. This is just one example, but in Romans, for example, it says, "Oh, the depth and riches both of wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable are his judgments, his ways past finding out. For who hath known the mind of the Lord, or who hath been his counselor?" We can know what God reveals to us, certain manifestations and so forth, but to fully know every aspect, everything about God, that's beyond us. We know in part, we see in part. Certainly we can know God through Christ, his Son, who is God, but there are some things that are beyond our level. and that's just something you're going to have to accept. So getting back to this example here, God has provided manifestations and ways for us to understand things. Even throughout the scriptures, He presents different aspects of His character and His nature that He's able to teach us things. In Hebrew, there's different words that describe God, and they can describe different aspects of His nature. For example, there's a word for God that's Jehovah Jireh, which means the Lord my provider, which is one of the Hebrew names for God. And there are others as well that exemplify God in different aspects of His character. So, but that's just, that's even contained within the nature of reality itself. We cannot understand things without having these particular contrasts. So let me clear this out here for a second, so I can kind of use this as a whiteboard. Okay, so without having that dichotomy, one thing defining the other, without breaking it down into those different elements, we can't understand anything. I'll give you another example here. Okay, again, the number 0. Even the number 0, if you don't have the body of the number 0, which is different from the void center, it would basically look like a empty piece of paper. You wouldn't be able to describe anything. You have to have that contrast to be able to describe anything. If it's all uniform, we cannot grasp the understanding of it. So the number 0, which represents emptiness, if we wanted to create something out of nothing, if you will, well, one way we can do it mathematically, okay, is we can separate the number of 0 out into two parts. In this case, we'll do -1 and +1, okay? -1 and +1 is the same thing as the number 0. They cancel each other out. The only difference is they're separated into, you're dividing 0 into two different parts, -1 and +1. You have to have these two contrasting parts in order to keep harmony with existence, if you will. You can't create a +1 without creating a -1 and vice versa. So if the +1 represents something, substance, and the -1 represents emptiness, void, 0 really represents chaos, the combination of two, the uncreation of these two elements. If you brought +1 and -1 together, they would self-destruct. It would be like matter and antimatter. You would create nothing at that point. You create 0 if you can recombine these two. Okay. 0 is the way we represent 0. Again, like I said, we have a notation here, but really it represents nothing. So if you were even to get rid of the body here, you just have a void. That would be the emptiness. You couldn't even really describe the emptiness, because in order for us to understand emptiness, we ourselves have to exist in order to behold or consider the emptiness. So there again is, you still have that dichotomy. You as the viewer looking at a blank empty page. Okay, if I cleared all this out, so let me select all, and we'll go delete. Okay, if we represented this as a blank empty page, you as the viewer are something, even if what you're looking at is nothing. So you still have that dichotomy between something and nothing. If you, like the -1 and the +1, if you were to join those two elements together, the nothing and the something, you would annihilate. You would cancel each other out. You wouldn't even be nothing. You'd be chaos, because you couldn't describe nothing. And the divine aspect of God transcends that. He's above and beyond even the element of chaos. He is in the beginning, even before the creation of something and nothing. Okay. So God creates the heavens and the earth, but in order to do that, in order to divide those two elements, He needs to be above and beyond that, which He is. He transcends the existence of creation itself, and the canvas of His creation is beyond our knowing. The chaos that He created nothing and something out of, that He created the heavens and the earth out of, it's beyond our knowing. The way is unsearchable for us, because we cannot understand the elements of something and nothing combined into one entity without annihilating, if you will. It doesn't work that way. It would be to uncreate the very reality in which we live in, if that makes sense. So the only way we can understand the aspects of God really is through the different various manifestations that he presents. But they need to be kept separate. You cannot bring them together, or it creates annihilation, uncreation, destruction, death, etc. So we understand certain parts and manifestations of God, and there are other parts that we won't be able to understand and can't understand, and it's necessary that we don't understand it, because to do so would be to uncreate. There's this, if you've all seen the like the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie, when they want to open at the end of the movie, they open up the Ark of the Covenant, and Indiana Jones says, "Don't look at it," and he tells Marion, his companion, "Don't look at it." Okay, and they're all going to find the secrets of God and everything. They open up the Ark of the Covenant, and they look inside, and then all of a sudden the spirits start moving around, and their faces begin to melt. If you've seen the movie, they're basically uncreating at that point. There are things that are beyond knowing that we shouldn't know. Now, how does that play out in the scriptures? Well, in the Garden of Eden, and I'm getting ahead of myself in creation here. The Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve did something they shouldn't do. They ate the knowledge of good and evil. Well, good and evil, the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil are two dichotomies on this line here. We have good, okay, and then we have evil, which is the polar opposite, okay. So they ate the fruit of a tree that has the seeds, if you will, of these two particular aspects. Combined into one entity, that would be death. And God warned that the day you eat the fruit thereof, you shall surely die. It's not for mankind to know good and evil. A God can know that. That's within the ability of the God. But for man, man is a created thing. He was never designed to recombinate the structures of good and evil together. Okay. These need to be kept separate. There needs to be something that defines good and something that defines evil, okay, and keeps the two apart. So what separates good and evil? What keeps them apart? That's probably for another video. But the necessity of having those two things kept apart is a necessity for existence itself. Without that, you'd have the recombination on creation of everything. So let me just 1 second. I'm going to create a blank page again so we can kind of start from beginning, literally in the beginning. So select all, edit, delete. Okay, so let's kind of follow along in Genesis here in terms of the creation of the universe, getting back to that idea of a compass, and the Hebrew words better sheet and so forth. All right, so we have here an empty space. In order to place a compass upon the empty space, the depths, if you will, we have the heavens and the earth. Now, right now, from our vantage point, as we're looking down on this empty space, if this is represented the earth, that means that we're looking overhead upon this blank empty canvas. So from our vantage point here, if we're kind of following on, we're looking almost from the vantage point of the heavens, the way it's being described. So how do you place a compass upon the depths, upon empty space? Well, you have to have a point. Well, where do you get a point from? Imagine for a second, if you could, if God's finger was placed upon this empty space and it held firm, okay, to a certain portion of it, then you rotated the rest of it like a circle, okay, but you held firm the center point. What would happen is the torque of the outer circle here would tear away, creating a separate point here in the middle. So that is how we could get our separate point. Now, the reason why I bring this up is not because God necessarily stuck his finger in empty space and held it and twisted it, but that if you read the scriptures, and I'll go back here in just a second. Okay, it says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." Now I'm going to look at that word "moved" there. It's denoting motion and movement. Hang on a second here. The word is rachaf. And it says that to be moved, to be affected, especially with the feeling of tender love, hence cherish, to feel, to tremor, to tremble, to be terrified. It also means to hover over. Now the sense here is kind of like a bird flapping its wings over the water and stirring it up. Okay. The point is that you're creating motion. You're creating what was a one uniform element. You're creating, vortexes, waves, something that changes the position of a portion of that watery, empty substance from the rest of the water empty substance. So getting back to how I was describing here, it's not exactly necessarily like you would take your finger and you put it down on a piece of paper and you spin the piece of paper, but you hold that point firm until it tears away and it creates a point there. The point is that you have movement and motion so that you're creating waves and ripples and starting points, etc. Okay, some place to start upon. So from that, I'm kind of getting the conjecture of possibly creating a point in space, a point in time, where you have different elements of the substance you're working with that are behaving and moving and conforming into, or manifesting into, physical representations that are different from the substance around it that before it used to be uniform with. Okay, so let me select this all here again. So that's one consideration of oversimplification of how we can possibly create a point. So hang on a second here. So undo this. Oops. Select all. And delete. Okay, so now, so we can create a point. Now, what does that do when we do that? Well, we're separating then into two elements, which is very necessary for creation. You have to have something and nothing, okay, at the very start. So you have, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Again, the bara, okay. So the outside here, heavens, and then the empty black void, vortex, whatever you want to call it, vortices, this dot that you create, empty nothing, the earth. The earth was without form, it was void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Now form, in the Hebrew, it's the earth was tohu vavohu, without form and void. Okay. Now form is when you shape the outer aspect, the body of it. So for example, if I had a lump of clay, okay, and I want to shape it into a figurine or something, like this, make a little person out of it, whatever. Okay. The form is the outward aspects of it, making eyes and stuff like that. It's not the inside, the substance part, when you're shaping the form. So you're fashioning and you're forming the body part of it. That's what creates the form of it. The earth was without form, so it had no form to it. It had no outward exterior manifestation. It was impossible for it to, because first of all, it describes it as water, an abyss. And if we think of the states of matter, you have 4 states of matter. You have plasma, you have a gas, you have a liquid, and you have a solid. Of those 4 states of matter, the only one that can really retain information is a solid. So if you have a block of granite, we can chisel it away, and it will keep its form, and it will retain information. If we have a clay tablet, okay, and we etch into it letters, okay, on the clay tablet, it can retain that information as long as the tablet exists because it retains the form, okay. So we're able to affect information upon a solid object, but if we have, say, a liquid or a gas, okay, you can take a pencil and you can write on a liquid, but it's just going to self-erase very quickly. It does not retain its information. A gas even more so. You can swirl around in the air, but it's just going to change the airflow and currents. It's not going to retain information. So what we have here is it's described, this original substance is described as an empty void that's akin to a liquid. It does not retain information. It has no form, okay? And it's also, that's the outer exterior of it, and it's also void. Now that's the substance of it, the inner body of it, if you will. So inside, there's nothing there, it's empty. So if you think, for example, in the case of a loaf of bread, okay, we have the outer crust. If we create a loaf of bread, the substance will be the white inner portion. Okay. There's this theory by this fellow named Heisenberg, created the uncertainty principle, that says that basically, in essence, among other things, you can't really know anything because you don't know if your active observation or looking at something actually changes it. So, for example, if I had a loaf of bread and I want to know what's inside of a loaf of bread, I could take a knife and I could cut the loaf of bread open. And I could look, and once I have the loaf of bread broken in half, I could see that there's this white doughy substance inside once I have separated it into the two halves. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I know the substance of the loaf of bread, because I don't know that my act of slicing through the loaf of bread caused, I can't really know for sure. I mean, obviously I can assume that this ain't the case, but I can't really know that it didn't cause this white doughy substance to appear on the surface. And the inside I really can't observe. And as many times as I cut it, all I'm going to do is create another surface or another outer body, if you will. There's always going to be a surface. To know the inner substance is impossible from an observation standpoint. You can't really know the inner substance of something. So you can know the form, you can know the outward manifestation, but the inner substance is going to be unknowable. So the earth was without form and void. It's unknowable. There was darkness upon the face of the deep. You cannot know what's inside the darkness. And it says that the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. He stirred it up. And at this point in time, it says that God spoke and he said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Now, if you remember in John, it says that the light shined in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. There was a separation between the two. The two cannot mix or understand each other. Now, the light can cast out the darkness. It can chase away the darkness. But the two do not recombinate. They do not form one entity, if you will. So let me select all here. And we're going to clear this out again. So anyways, getting back into my discussion. So we talked about creating the point on which you can place a compass. So you have the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So we have two elements here. We have a body now that separates the empty, a division point, a membrane, if you will, without any form. It does not retain information, but it's empty, it's void, it's like a black hole, if you will. And then we have the outward, the heavens that are around the earth, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So God is in the heavens at this point, moving over the face of the empty void. And then God speaks and says, "Let there be light," and the light shines into the darkness, but the darkness comprehends it not. Okay? And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. So even though there's now inside this empty void, this darkness, okay, there is a substance now that God spoke into the earth. He spoke light into the earth, okay? But the light and the darkness do not recombine. They separate. The light retains its lightness, or excuse me, its features of being light, if you will, if it's a photon or being a particle or a wave. But the light and the darkness are not the same thing. They are divided. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form, void, and darkness upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light was good. He separated the light from the darkness. It says the evening and the morning were the first day. Now this is kind of an interesting element too, because there's no sun yet. All right. Well, there is apparently time. Okay, so you can still have a 24-hour period, and even though there's no sun, you could still have a rotational aspect to the world at that point in time. Now it's interesting to note that there are fixed points in terms of the emptiness of space, even if there's nothing inside of it. And I'll give you an example. If you took every physical thing out of the universe, every piece of, every photon, every piece of matter, every atom, so that there was just nothing in the universe except complete, empty, infinite black space. Absolutely nothing. Okay. and then you put yourself in the middle of the universe, okay? So you're the only thing in the universe at this point, just you and infinite empty space around you, okay? There is no reference point for you to know what's up or down, left or right, because there's nothing to be up or down or left or right to. However, physics tells us that if you started spinning in that empty space, and then spinning in reference to what, I don't know, but if you just started spinning in that empty space, you would know because your arms, because of the centrifugal force, would begin to want to pull outward. But again, the question is, what are you spinning in reference to? There's no up, there's no down, there's no object to be. Well, apparently there is. That would mean that empty space, even completely empty space devoid of everything in it that exists, still maintains some. It still acts as a medium of some sort of information or law that it must abide by. It still has a dimensionality to it. It still has up. It still has down. It still has a left. It still has right. These are absolutes, and if you exist in empty space and you begin to move contrary to these, you will feel the physical effects of moving contrary to these. But the question is, if there's nothing, I mean absolutely nothing, not a single item of matter or anything, it's just empty space, then what are these physical laws written upon? How does empty space, nothing, contain the information, the manifestation of these physical laws? What are they contained in? What's the medium of exchange of that information? What are the elements? There's no particle interaction because particles don't exist. So, we say we feel gravity, and science would say that that's because of gravitons, particle exchange of information. But if there's absolutely nothing, there's still laws that are written upon that nothingness of empty space, of dimensionality and direction. So, getting back to what I was saying with, and God separated the light from the darkness, and the light he called day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and morning were the first day. The rotation of one day can exist, or the traveling of cycles and so forth, can exist upon the elements written in the dimensionality of space, even if nothing exists in it, including suns and stars and etc. One day can still happen from a dimensional aspect, even if you don't have a sun to measure it, because that's all the sun is really doing. It's measuring a period of time. But yet aspects of time and space can exist even if the sun isn't there to measure it, if that makes sense. So in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and you could still have a 24-hour period, and a separation from light and darkness, if you will, but you wouldn't have that manifest in, say, a sun going around and shining on one side of the earth where it's light and the other side's dark, but you could still have that rotation, okay? You could still have that movement through space for the earth that would indicate one full revolution or one day. But then getting back to the question, the creation of light, if the evening and the morning were the first day, what does it mean by evening and morning? Because if there's no sun, how can you have an evening and how can you have a morning? Well, that's an interesting question too, and that goes a little bit into ancient astronomy. So let me clear this out real quick here. So we're going to delete all this. Okay. So in ancient astronomy, here's how this would work. You have the zodiac, the signs in the heaven, which are the constellations. You'd have 12 of them. So you'd have Libra, Taurus, etc., whatever. The 12 signs of the zodiac, the constellations would be broken down into sections in the sky. Now, if you're on Earth, okay, the sky itself, the zodiac itself, not the sun moving through the sky, but the sky itself will rotate every 24 hours. So what happens is, at any given point in time, you can see at night, at the beginning of night, okay, as the sun sets, you can begin to see half of the zodiac, all right? And then it will slowly rotate throughout the night, and it'll get to its opposite point by the time dawn breaks. And as dawn breaks, you'll see the other half of the zodiac that prior to that was unobservable because it was on the other side of the Earth, at the beginning of night. Okay, so you see the one half of the zodiac at the beginning of night, and then as the night progresses on until dawn, you see the other half of the zodiac. Okay, so when it talks about the evening and the morning, it's talking about the this time when space itself, the observable space, is at this position. The evening is the time between at sunset, basically, if there is a sun. But even if there's not a sun, there's still that rotational time there. And the morning is the other half. Now, if you don't have stars in the heaven, if you don't have sun, that, as I said earlier, with the example of you spinning and your arms flowing out, you can still have that rotational aspect of time, even if you don't have the manifestation of those objects to measure it. Okay, that doesn't mean that still doesn't exist. You can still have one rotation. So you can have an evening and a morning. Now, the reason why the evening and the morning are important in the Old Testament is because in ancient times, when they would want to measure astronomical observations, because they can only see half the sky at the start of night and the other half at the start of dawn, in order to get a full observation of the whole heavens, they had to take the first observation at the evening, when they could see this half of the sky, and then they had to take the second observation at the morning, when this half of the sky comes around. Okay, and so what would happen is, at sunset, some of the stars would be on this side of the sun. Okay, and some of the stars would be on this side of the sun, particularly the stars that move, like the planets, Mercury, Venus, etc. And so if you want to know where the stars are in relation to the sun, because it's so close, you have to see them just around the time of dawn, before it gets too bright, or just after dusk, after the sun sets, when it begins to get dark, but they're still close to where the sun set before they disappear. If you want to see them, you have to make those observations just at those times. You'll only be able to see some of the stars on this side at sunrise, and then you'll only be able to see some of the stars at this side at sunset. Okay, otherwise then the light becomes too obscure, or they go below the horizon, and you won't be able to see the stars that were really close to the sun, because the sky continues to rotate. So if that makes sense, they actually be over here. You'll be able to see the other stars on this side as the sun goes down. Okay, the stars that are close to the sun will quickly disappear below the horizon, so you have to watch it at sunset. Here, you have to see those stars on this side of the sun just before sunrise, because then the light will obscure them and you won't be able to see them during the day as they move throughout the sky. So if that makes sense. So that's how that works. That's why they do the evening and the morning sacrifice at the temple, because they wanted to get those observations at those times. And that's how they did their astronomical observations. So that's the evening and the morning. You don't have to have a sun, a moon, and a stars for there to be an evening and a morning. That can still exist, and then later the sun and the moon and the stars became the objects that you could measure the rotations of the evening and the morning. So getting back to now, let's go back to Genesis. So in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and the light he called day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. So the first day God creates light. Now light in itself is a dichotomy of things. For example, light is made up of a photon, which is both a particle and a wave. It can act as both things at the same time. And if we look at a wave, a manifestation of a wave of light, it's an electromagnetic wave. So we would have the electro part here, which is a dichotomy of the magnetic part of the wave here, okay, which are peaks and valleys, okay. We can also think of time, or of light, excuse me, in the essence of massing. So, for example, if you mass together into a particle, okay, or stretching out beyond the constant, that is the emptiness of space, if you will, to the point where you get points of separation, skips, if you will, almost in a wave form, okay, like this. So you can stretch it out into sections, or you can mass it together, and light does that both. It manifests itself as an object that's massed together, into something that has density, if you will, and then it separates itself into something that is really less than empty, if you will. It's stretched out into points where it skips, if you will. So light acts as this dichotomy. It acts as a particle and a wave, yet it doesn't have mass. Well, it should have it as a particle, but it's canceled out by the fact that it's a wave. So once you combine these two, it really doesn't have mass. Okay, even though it acts as a particle and a wave. I want to get back to the compass and the point that I was talking about. So let's say we create a point here. Okay. If we were to magnify that point, and that's really what alpha is. It's an active magnification. You have something that starts here. You can magnify it into a larger example. This is a little circle. This is a big circle, but it's void and empty in the middle. This one is uniform in substance. Okay. You can magnify that point so that it is essentially, this is essentially the same as this, in the same way that 0 can be magnified into -1 and +1. Okay. You can have a +1, a substance, a body on the outside, and a -1, which is the void in the middle, or you can recombine them into a central point where they are basically, you can't even understand the concept. It's infinity. It's something that you would have to basically almost get rid of the space around it and the point, and to make it into one thing that's incomprehensible in order to understand the concept of 0. We can't understand it. We can try to kind of manifest notations that would exemplify it, but even our notations require a dichotomy between, say, the inner part of the 0 and the outer part of the 0. So the best way we can do by describing it is by describing both elements at the same time. If we want to describe nothing, chaos really, and that is what it is, all we can do is combine it into one thing that is really an aspect of two opposing elements. Okay, so nothing, 0, even though we're still breaking it down into two elements, thing and no. Okay, because that's the closest we can get to describe it. If you want to magnify 0 or nothingness into something, okay, you would using like I'm saying here with the compass, or the alpha concept of magnification, you would divide it out into greater parts. You would have the outer part, the body, which is something, and the inner part, which is empty, which is nothing. Okay. So that's what the alpha aspect of this, the compass aspect of this does. You take a point, and you're going to make this point into something else. You're going to make it into a circle. Okay. It's still, in essence, the same thing as this point. It's just magnified or manifested into a different form. And in this case, the form is a circle with a void in the middle, and a substance on the outside, and empty nothing in the middle. Okay. This is going to exemplify the rotation of the first day. I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, because that would sound very confusing. Okay, so let's start with our point here. Okay, the first thing that God created above all else was time. In the beginning, that was the first creation. If you create a beginning, there's an ending. Okay, there's a dichotomy there that's created, a contrast. To go beyond that contrast, to recombinate those two, to get to that point of chaos that it's unknowable by us, the description there is in the beginning. Okay, it's something we can't really go beyond that event horizon of what the beginning is, because that's unknowable for us. That would be combining both good and evil, if you will. That we can't understand that. To bring together antimatter and matter, to bring together -1 and +1, or to bring together those two concepts in our mind of both beginning and ending as one substance, to transcend before that point, that recombination is annihilation. We can't know that. We weren't designed to know that. That's like the knowledge of good and evil. We can't know that. But the best we can do is we can deal with the divided, separated aspects of it to understand different manifestations of it, but not together as one substance. So in the beginning, that's the tree that's at the center point of the garden. Okay, we can eat all of the information of the trees around the garden. We cannot eat the tree of the fruit that's in the center of the garden, if you will. All right, so in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. So the beginning, if we act as it as a dot, if you will, okay. And I know I have a emptiness here. Hang on a second, because it's not really this. We want this dot to be filled here. Okay, so we don't have any void. The first thing God created was time. Okay. So if we consider this dot as the starting point, the start in the beginning, the zero-dimensional aspect. Okay. Time. This is one thing that I think that a lot of people don't quite understand, or that's mistaken by physics. We think of time as a fourth dimensional aspect to the reality of our nature. Okay. The dimensions that we have first dimension, let's say that's up and down. Okay. The second dimension, we'll say that's left and right. The third dimension, which is kind of hard to demonstrate on here, but if you can imagine this arrow pointing right at you, so that your position viewing this is the third dimensional position, and the paper is the polar opposite of that. So I guess it would be in and out. Okay, so you got up and down, left and right, and in and out. Okay. That would be the third dimensional position here, which I can't really point. So I have one arrow that would point exactly at you, and one arrow that would point exactly away from you in the opposite direction. So if you can imagine this dot as, let's say this dot was a line. That's not even actually what I want to show here. I'll do it with, okay. Imagine that this dot was a line. Okay. Now you are here. Whoops. Hang on a second. Now you're here, okay? You're sitting at your computer. You're looking right at the endpoint of that line, okay? Imagine this is that endpoint. This is you looking at that endpoint right there, and this is that endpoint. So behind this endpoint, there is a line that extends for a long period of time, all right? That's the third dimensional aspect of this particular dot, okay? The very fact that you exist to observe this dot creates one of these dimensions. Okay, in order to truly create a zero-dimensional dot, this deals with the third dimensional aspect of it. In order to create the dimension that we want to deal with here, which is one of time. Okay, time is a dimension, in my opinion, of magnification. Getting back to that letter A. Okay, so in and out would be one dimension. That's you facing this particular dot. Okay. Up and down, that would be another. Left and right, that would be another. So we could move this dot up. We could move this dot down. We could move this dot left. We could move this dot right. And then the third dimension, we could bring the whole thing closer to you or move the whole thing further away from you. That would be the third dimensional aspect of it. Here is the fourth dimensional aspect that people don't seem to grasp, in my opinion. And that is one of magnification. So instead of moving it in one of these three realms, we can make the whole scale of things bigger or smaller. So let's say this line magnified to this size, okay, or this line shrunk down to a little tiny line here. So you would have, in terms of scale, you could have a small line, or you could have it get very, very large. Now you would say, wasn't it just moving in all these three dimensions at the same time then? I mean, it's getting larger this way, it's getting larger this way, it's getting larger this way, it's getting larger this way. No, and the reason why is because when it moves left or right, it's moving left or right in space. Okay, when it moves up or down, it's moving up or down in space. When it's moving three-dimensionally, so if this began to move towards you, it's moving towards you in space. The fourth dimension of magnification is the whole scale of everything getting bigger or smaller. The whole scale of space itself getting bigger or smaller. That's the fourth dimensional aspect of time. Now there's an object. Hang on a second here. Select all. Edit. Delete. There's an object called a tesseract, which is a way to represent a four-dimensional object. What it is it's a cube. So I'm going to draw a cube here. It's kind of poorly drawn, but that's what it is. It's a cube. Okay. Sorry. If you can kind of envision here, let's say that's a cube. Okay. A cube is a three-dimensional object. All right. Here's the front side, right here. Here's the side view. Here's the top of the cube. Inside, there's the bottom of the cube. And then you got the back wall back here, and the very back wall back here. So that's a cube. All right. So anyways, a cube is a four-dimensional or a three-dimensional object. A tesseract looks kind of like a cube embedded inside of a larger cube. And supposedly there's these different points here that come out from the corners. They are at right angles to the inner cube. So I'm going to connect these outer walls here. Okay. I know this is really poorly drawn, so you'll just have to envision that this is a large cube. Okay, and inside you have a small cube, and then the corners of the small cube connect to the corners of the large cube. Okay, and that's what a tesseract is. Okay, and a tesseract is a fourth-dimensional object in physics. All right. So if you look at what you have here, the inner cube is basically a smaller scale of the outer cube, which is a larger scale of the same object. That is the fourth-dimensional aspect of time. It is moving along the scale of scale itself, if you will. The scale itself is getting larger or smaller. That's the aspect of the fourth dimension. So, getting back to the original point here. Hang on a second. In the beginning. So in the beginning, we have time. Somewhere inside that dot is something that we can't really know. Okay, it goes beyond the beginning. It is unknowable to us. That is the region of God, and it's only for God to know that stuff. So we are described it into two elements here. We can see different manifestations of it, but we cannot see the recombinant nature of it as one entity, because that would be like seeing the face of God. We cannot do that. Okay, we're not designed to do that. Our minds are not designed to handle that, because we are created beings. So the in the beginning suggests that there's an out. Obviously, if you have an out, you have to have an in, you have to have an out. And the beginning suggests that there's an ending. You have a beginning, you have an ending. You have to have that dichotomy, because otherwise, without that dichotomy, the two elements don't exist. Okay? The out and the in, the beginning and the ending. Okay? So the first aspect of time, again, we have elements of time and space. In and out, elements of scale. Small, large. Okay? Your small dot here, your large dot here. Inside the substance, just like Heisenberg's principle in the loaf of bread, you can't really know the inside. The outside, we can know, because we're not in the inside. We're not beyond that black hole event horizon, if you will. We can know the stuff outside the black hole, but inside the black hole, we can't know that. That's beyond our nature. Okay. So in and out, the beginning and the ending. We are beyond the beginning. Okay. So whatever information, wherever it started from, by the time it gets to us, we are the end point of that information. Now, there are lots of beginnings and endings. You can have a start of a day, a start of a week, the end of a week, the end of a day, and so forth. So the in the beginning part, okay, the part we can't know, we are observing that from outside at the end point for that particular point of information getting to us. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. All right. By the time it gets out to us, at the ending of receiving that information, we're able to understand it. We're made in the image of God, it says. We're made in the reflection of God. God speaks, God says, God does things, and we are subject to that. We are the end of it. We're supposed to manifest and reflect that. And then we turn around and do the same thing to nature that we are subject to, because God made us in his image to rule and subdue the earth. In the same way that we are subject to God, then we go out and we are to govern the planet justly and accordingly, and subjugate it to us and ultimately to God's will. We reflect that. Okay, so there's different aspects of God's nature that are manifest in different levels, if you will. And this is somewhat exemplified in the temple in Jerusalem, because inside you have the Holy of Holies, then you have the holy place and the outer courts and so forth, and then that's in the center of the city of Jerusalem, which is in the center of Israel, which is in the center of the earth. It's called the navel of the earth. So you have these different elements of magnifications of inner and outer, with walls separating the different courts and so forth. So anyways, so God creates time first. Select all, edit, delete. Okay, so we're going to get to this compass here sooner or later. So we create our dot here, okay? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So in the beginning, first you have a point of time. You have a little dot here, and obviously you have empty space, and that time-wise, this element can grow into, if you will, by elements of scale. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now that we have our point, we can begin to move this point up and up on the scale using magnification. So if a point starts here, okay, and we're going to magnify it from the alpha into the omega, the end point, the beginning and the ending. Okay. The earth was without form and void. So God creates that. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So when you magnify the start point into these greater elements, you've got the negative 1 and the 0 and the positive 1 shell, okay? It's still the same thing as the dot. I mean, in essence, it's still a dot. It's manifested or magnified into a circle, an empty circle or 0, but the essence of it is still the same thing. It's still connected, okay? So even though you've got emptiness in the inside and you've got the shell on the outside, the negative 1 and the positive 1, negative 1 plus positive 1 still, at the end of the day, cancel each other out to 0 to make nothing, okay? So this dot is manifest or magnified as this 0, still the same thing, just manifest in a different way. But these two are cannot be separated from each other. They're both the aspects of the same element, the inner empty part and the outer shell, if you will. In quantum physics, there's this concept called entanglement, which is you can have two particles that once they become entangled, they will always carry that coexistence between each other in terms of attributes. So, for example, if you do something to this particle, something will happen to this one in response because they're entangled. They're two elements of the same thing, and quantum mechanics has a lot of difficulty. Quantum scientists have a lot of difficulty understanding this. But if they are two aspects of the same thing, if they're entangled like that, you could take this particle and put it on Earth, and you could take this particle and put it way on the other end of the universe. This is how weird entanglement is. Okay. And once you do that, you could do something to affect this particle, and the same thing would instantaneously happen to this particle way at the other end of the universe, instantaneously. Even though you're millions and billions and trillions and zillions of miles away, and it's faster than the speed of light, yet still, if you do something to this particle, instantaneously it will affect this one at the other end of the universe. That's entanglement. The reason for that is because they're the aspects of the same thing. Just as positive 1 and negative 1 can't exist unless you separate it from the original source of 0, the outer shell and the inner emptiness cannot exist here unless they were from the same source. They were simply magnified into that outer source, if that makes sense. But they're still the same thing. They're still connected by the two legs. The two aspects of it are still connected back to the original source. They're still the same thing. You cannot separate them in that respect. So now that we have our point, if we're going to put our compass on here to magnify this, okay, in the manifestation of it, this point's going to disappear, but it's still going to exist in the form of the 0 and the empty void, even though we're pivoting on this point. Okay, so once we complete the circle, sure, this part may disappear, it might be empty, or unknowable, if you will, but it still exists in the form, a magnified form, of the outer circle and the empty inner part. Okay. So from that, we're able to get a circle. And this will be the evening and the morning is the first day. So let me select all here. Now we're going to show you some kind of cool stuff and how that plays in with Scripture. All right, so I'm going to create a circle. Remember, we start out with a point, but from that point, we're going to spin our compass on that point. We're going to create a circle. When we do that, that point in the middle is going to disappear because it's manifest as the outer shell of the circle and the empty center. So let me go here. We'll do this. So we're going to create a circle here. I'm going to select this circle and copy. So now the interesting thing is, because that point existed, and that was our pivot point to start out with, now it's gone once we create the circle. Now where are we going to place the compass for the next day? Because if this is the first day, right, that we're going to represent here, the rotation of time, the start of time, because remember, just like placing your finger on the paper and twisting it and rotating it, we're creating a rotation here. We're moving upon the waters. We're creating time. Okay. So if you did that, if you twisted that point, if you will, what would that create? Sorry, just one second here. We want to undo this thing here. Okay. If you were spinning that point in space, just like I mentioned earlier about if you're spinning in space, you would feel your arms begin to pull apart. If you began spinning that point in space, there would be an outward pull of that point on its edges towards the exterior shell of it, and in essence, the force of it, because there's nothing out here to act against it, it would cause that point to expand into this shell with an emptiness in the middle. Okay. So simply by rotating that point in space, you can cause the magnification that you're looking for, a vortex, if you will. And that will create the outer shell, that in a sense like the compass placed upon the waters. And this will continue on. It will continue to, as long as it's rotating, it will continue, as long as time exists, it will continue to want to expand further and further outward. That's the nature of the point. It will continue to magnify. This is the aspect of time. On scale, it starts out as a point and it continues to grow in scale to larger and larger points. Okay. Now each rotation is 1 day. All right. So hang on a second here. We're going to let me undo these arrows. Okay, so the evening and the morning of the first day. Actually, I'm going to undo all these arrows. Okay, so understand that this point is going to continue to magnify. Now, because this circle, even though it's empty and void in the middle, now that it's grown in time, if you will, now that it's expanding, almost lifelike in that respect, as it grows, okay, the outer shell and the inner emptiness all combine to make the original point. It's the same point, just manifested differently. Because you have no longer an inner point, where can you place your compass for the next day? Well, the outer shell is the same thing as the physical manifestation of that point with the emptiness around it. We basically just inverted it. We've got emptiness on the inside, and then we have the outer shell. Okay, so the point part, in terms of being able to place a compass on, actually exists in the outer shell now, whereas before it was that inner center point. You still had a dichotomy between the emptiness around it and the center point that you created through movement and rotation. But now, because of the growth of that center point, that inner shell, or that inner infinity, it becomes the exterior shell, and that's where the substance of that point exists. It no longer exists in the emptiness anymore. So if we're going to place a compass, we can place it anywhere on this outer shell, because now this becomes our focal point, if you will. Now if we do that, so here's what I'm going to do here. Okay, so we're going to create a second circle. Now, let's assume that's the inner circle sitting in the middle of the page. Okay, I'll pull this offside for a second. Now, if we're going to place our compass anywhere we want on that point, so let's say we started at the top, we could then draw a second circle. This is a Christian symbol as well, from dating from Roman times, and it makes what's called the fish. This is the ichthos here, which you've probably seen in the back bumper of cars. Little decals, and it actually stands for an acronym for Jesus Christ. But this there's a name for this. It's like Vasquez Pasai or something. I have to look. Hold on. I'll find that out real quick here. Just 1 second. Okay, it's the ichthos, and it's from Greek. It's iota chi theta upsilon sigma. It stands for Jesus Christ, God, Son, Savior. Okay, and it actually combines. If you took all those letters in Greek and you combine them together, it makes this interesting chi-rho symbol. This is what Constantine believes that he saw as a vision when he was going to become emperor, and it said, "In this sign conquer." He saw the chi-rho. And you can see this in Rome today at the Roman Catholic Church. There's a lot of examples of the chi-rho symbol, but this is the ichthos. Okay, and it's an early Christian symbol. It's a way for Christians to be able to basically communicate that they were a Christian without giving it away to the Romans, so that they wouldn't be persecuted. Because Christianity was outlawed then, so they used the ichthos symbol as a code to basically say that they were Christians. And it actually also derives from another symbol, in addition to being a fish here, and I'll find it in a second. It's called, hang on 1 second here. Okay, so here it is. It's the Vesica Pisces. Pisces, you'll recognize as a symbol as the sign for the fish. That's what Pisces means. Also known as the name literally means the bladder of the fish, if you will. But you can see the kind of the ichthos fish symbol that's created there, and it's kind of an ancient symbol. But the fish symbol was used early on in Christianity as a code to basically say that you were a Christian without giving away the game to the Romans, so that you wouldn't end up persecuted. So anyways, getting back to our symbol here, Vesica Pisces. So if we were to be able to start here, okay, we can pick any spot, but if we started here for our compass point, and then we created a second circle, just like we did the first, okay, around the new point that we created, something very interesting would happen at this juncture, where the two circles intersect, because here we have void, 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 okay, where the two circles intersect, we would actually create two new points, because where two lines cross, you create a point in dimensionality. All right. So whereas before we had a point, we created a circle and it disappeared, and now we can pick anywhere along this line here to create our second point. Now we have points created for us by the existence of these two circles in this Vesica Pisces, here or here. And so because of that, we can now have a choice to place our compass on 2 points, and we can continue to make our circles here. So I'm going to go ahead and paste some other circles here. Oops. Edit. Undo. Okay, so let's go ahead. Now we create another circle here. I'm going to go ahead and place one here. And I'm going to go ahead and if you notice here, now that we placed another circle and another based on this point, now we create another 2 points, one here and one here. So now we have more points that we can create circles. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go, each time a point shows up, I'm going to create a circle around it just like I had a compass and I was spinning around it, and then we'll see what the image is when we're all done, what we come up with. So just 1 second. Okay, this isn't exact, but it's kind of the best I can do, just throwing it together. What we have here, so I started with each point, and for each point I create a circle around it, and I can show you let's do the points here. Okay, so here's a point. Oops. Hang on a second, I'll do it this way. So if I take, oops. So if I take the point here, that's a point. You can see the circle around it on the outside. Next one, here's a point. You can see the circle around it on the outside, and so on and so forth. So you've actually got, I'll place them in here. Like so. And of course you have our original one. Okay. So there's the points. Now this is known, in sacred geometry, it's known as the flower of life. Is what that's extra biblical, but that's what it's commonly known as a form of geometry. And it's a common symbol throughout history. Hang on 1 second here. I want to get rid of this one. No, I can't. Okay. So anyways, ignore this one. All right, so you start out with your center point. Okay, that's the first day, if you will. Then you move up. You create another cycle, the second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, seventh day. Now, according to the Bible, in the first few chapters of Genesis, the earth was created in 6 days, and the seventh day set apart as resting, designated as holy, and that makes 1 week. So what happens is when you complete one cycle of 7 days, you get a large circle, a completion of that one cycle, which is 1 week. So you start out with a day, and you go through the scenarios here. You get a larger cycle 1 week. More importantly, you also get a magnification. You start out with a smaller inner circle. You magnify to a larger circle. So we see again an exemplification of time. Okay. Now here's what else is interesting about this. If we notice our points here, okay, there is a symbol that's created. If we were to connect these points from one to the other, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do it outside of this. You can kind of see it here, but let's say I connected this one to this one, so it would be like that. Okay, this to this, that to that. Now if I did the ones below it, it would be like that. Okay. Now if I connect this one to this one, so I'm connecting points. I'm connecting the dots is what I'm doing. Okay. Connect this to this one, dots. Connect this one to this one, dots. This one to this one, here to here, here to here, here to here, and so on and so forth. You see what I created here? A box, a cube. Okay. So I started out with circles. Actually, I started out with a dot. Okay. That's all I had to work with to start out with. But the rules of empty space, the rules of nature itself that were written on the fabric of empty space, confined and required me to adhere to specific drawings, specific mathematical required manifestations of, whatever the elements of math forced me to draw certain aspects of this creation. Okay, so this dot contained information, like a little seed, if you will, contained information that once you explore it further, it grew to the point where you created the cycle of 7, the completion of the number 7, and then when you connect all the dots together, you get a cube. So what do we have here? We have time, which is the aspect of magnification. Okay, so which is elements of scale. Okay, the dot grows into something bigger, and then from there it grows into something even bigger yet. Okay, and inside that there's 7 aspects to that now. Okay, so we start out with a little dot. We magnify that to a circle, which is basically the little dot manifests a different way. And then from there, we make this flower of life object, which contains 7 circles, which manifests it even larger. So we go from a starting point to a day to a week. Okay. So you see the different elements here. You also see, for example, talking about the 7 different spirits of God, which we talked about earlier. The 7 days, which is the 6 days of creation and the 1 day of rest. The last day being the complete day. The first element, the first dimensionality that's created is the aspect of time. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So first we have time. Then we have the manifestation into the first day, the first week. You see the progression of time moving forward. Okay. The second aspect is linear space. Okay, well, first dimension. All right. So you start with the 0.0th dimension, you move into the first dimension. So let's say side to side, left to right, 1 dimension. Okay. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. The darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Okay. So let's think about the elements of that statement dimensionally for a second. So in the beginning, so you have a statement of time. Okay. God created the heavens and the earth. So the heavens and the earth is a one-dimensional aspect. You have that which is above or that which is below. Okay. Well, let's do it this way. Instead of left and right, let's look at the first dimension as above and below. Okay. That'll be our first dimensional aspect. All right. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the second dimensional aspect. Once you get beyond, because the first dimension is a line. All right. Second dimension is a plane. So what does it say? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, a line. And the earth was without form. Now, if you remember what we discussed about earlier, form is the outside shell. It's not the substance. It's the surface of it. A plane, the surface material. Okay. The earth was without. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form. Second dimension, plane. The form describes the surface, the face of it. Okay. And then we have the third dimension, which is void. Void is the substance. It's the inner volume of the object. So if we had a box or a sphere, it's what's inside. Now we're into 3-dimensional aspect. First dimension, second dimension, third dimension. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form, and void. And then darkness was upon the face of the deep. Now, depth, again, giving back to the concept of time. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So you have the beginning point, the end point, the depth, the darkness is the unknown. You haven't reached the end yet, but depth is representational of scale, of time, okay? The depth of time, if you will. So we have 4 dimensions already laid out in the very first statement of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And when God troubles the waters, we have magnification, we have progression in time. Okay, starting with a dot, manifesting to the first day, and God said, "Let there be light," and He separated the light from the darkness, and so on and so forth. So we have the movement of time. We have all the elements of dimension in place before God created light. And when he created light, he created it as both particle and wave. Light is a photon. That's one aspect of the manifestation of it. But of course, the true physical, spiritual nature of it, that's not to say that light itself is Jesus in the sense that like an actual photon that's coming out of your light bulb would be, because there's a spiritual essence to that. It's talking about a deeper meaning when it says in John 1:1 where it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and that he was the light, and he shineth into the darkness, but the darkness comprehended it not. There's a spiritual aspect to that. The photon, the physical aspect, is merely one representation of light. In John, we're talking about something far deeper than that, if you will. So anyways, and you got to be careful with that, because it also says that Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. It doesn't mean he is an angel of light. It means he disguises himself as one. So anyways, let's get back to these 7 days of creation. And for this, we got to go back to Genesis. We got to look what it says. So just 1 second here. So let's go ahead and read through the rest of the days here. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light was good, and he divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which are under the firmament from the waters which are above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Second day he created sky. And then in verse 9 it says, "And God said, Let the waters under heaven be gathered together in one place, and let dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let the earth bring forth grass, and yield an herb yielding seed, and the fruit of the tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and tree yielding fruit, whose seed is in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the third day." So the third day, God he gathered the waters together to create seas. He brought forth dry land, and on the dry land he created fruit and vegetables, greens, grasses, so forth, and plants. So now the fourth day, it says, "And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and days and years." This is where we start to get into like photons and specifically the heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars, etc. A little bit different from the light we're talking about in the first verse of the Bible, or the first few verses of the Bible. It says, "And let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and he made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day." So the fourth day he creates sun, moon, and stars for the purposes of time, telling time. Okay. And then the next verse here we have, "And God said, Let the waters bring forth abundantly every moving creature that have life, and every fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of the heaven. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, and saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day." So the fifth day he creates fishes in the sea, birds in the air. And then God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, and cattle, and creeping thing, and the beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth on the face of the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let us make man in our image, and after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God created him. Male and female he created them. created he them. And God blessed them and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. And to every beast upon the earth, and every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. And God saw that everything he made, and behold, it was very good. In the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So on the sixth day, he creates the animals. He makes man, male, and female. And then he says, Be fruitful, multiply, and rule and subdue the earth. And he says that you can eat all the fruits of the trees and so forth, and the green herbs, and the animals, they can eat the green herbs. And that's the sixth day. And so we'll get to the seventh day here real quick. It says, And thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and the host of them, and on the seventh day God ended the work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from the work which God created and made. Okay, that's the last day. He blesses it, and he sets it apart. Kind of appropriate that's in the start of chapter 2, because it's set apart from the first 6 days. So let's go back. Now, having read that, we got the 6 days of creation and the 7th day of rest. Let's look at our 7 rotations here with our compass placed upon the emptiness of space-time, if you will, in order to create the heavens and the earth. So, I'm going to remove some of these red circles here, just so we can see what we're doing here. So let me do this. Take this out of here. 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 So this, by the way, this cube that's created by connecting these points, this is called Metatron's cube. And Metatron was actually, there's a extra biblical legend, if you will, that Enoch in the Bible, when he was, it says that Enoch walked with God and God took him, that he was changed into an angel named Metatron, and for basically learning and discovering certain things, and that now he serves the Lord day and night as an angel called Metatron, and this is the cube, one of his discoveries, basically. So the validity of that legend I can't say, but that's why this is called Metatron's cube in terms of what it's created in sacred geometry. But the interesting point here about the creation of this is that we start out with nothing but a dot. And we had to follow the rules that the dot, the rules of the physics of that the dot was subject to in terms of drawing all this. But contained within that dot, that tiny seed of information, is this and this. Now, how is it that this dot on a sheet of two-dimensional paper on a plane contains within it information that forces it to represent a three-dimensional object? Because a three-dimensional object is conceptual. You have to visualize or envision a three-dimensional object. Yet that information is contained within the seed of this dot, and it forces you to represent that. It only makes sense that three-dimensional object, just like art, if we were to look at art and we look at the Mona Lisa and we can understand that as a person, a human being, we as human beings have the ability to envision and conceptualize that. On paper, it's just pigmentation. The physics of it means nothing if you don't have a mind or a concept to grasp it and put it together to understand it as a human being. Same thing here. This three-dimensional object, which is Metatron's cube, which is represented in these dimensions here, it only makes sense if a human being is looking at this information. Otherwise, it's just a geometric shape with some lines that imposed on a surface, looks like a Y with like a kind of a hectagon around it or something like that. That's it. But it's amazing that this dot contains that information to create something like this, because I didn't create it, the rules created it, that would show three-dimensionality to a mind or a person observing it from an external viewpoint. This again shows that God does exist and that he's embedded his information within the nature around us. So anyways, getting back to this point here. So we're going to represent these as the different days of creation, and then the completion, the circumcision, the cutting off, if you will, on setting apart of the holy seventh day, the day of rest, of completion. That's why 7 is the number of completion. So let me choose a different color here. So the first day, hang on a second here. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. Now that's our first circle, without form and void here. The first thing God did was He created light. Okay. So we're going to represent this here as light, this yellow golden here. This is the evening and the morning of the first day. Here's the dawn, okay? And then He separated the light from the darkness. So that was our empty void of our first inner circle. So we're going to kind of create our empty void here. All right, so this is the darkness. Okay, in the evening and the morning were the first day. All right, so that's day 1. Okay, now the second day, now the empty darkness is represented as waters. Okay. The second day He created sky, and what He did with sky is He separated the waters that were above the heaven from the waters that were below the heaven. Okay, and that is sky. So here's our Vessia Pisces. You know, I'm gonna undo this because I kind of smudged over some areas. Here's a better way to represent it. If you see the Vessia Pisces, which is here, okay, there's several in there. There's actually a bunch of Vessia Pisces. There's multitudes of these that are created. They're almost like eyes, if you will, eye-shaped object. And there's lots of eyes in here that are created by this. We're going to go ahead and kind of show the blending of these things here. So if we have if this is light and we're separating the light out from the darkness, okay. You see this eye-shaped object here? Okay. We're going to place these 2 circles that create the Vessia Pisces here. Hold on a second. Okay, so you got there's the Vessia Pisces. I'm gonna use a different color so you can kind of see it a little bit. I'll use blue. There's the Vessia Pisces. Here's the eye-shaped thing that's created. You have the light, which is created, and the darkness, and then they're separated between the two. The evening and the morning of the first day. All right. Same thing happens when we go over to this one here. Now we've got the waters which were above the heaven, and then we still have our Vessia Pisces here. So we got the waters which were below the heaven, and we have our eye in the middle. This is sky. Separate the waters above from the waters below. Okay. Now, I know that doesn't look very good, so let me let me undo this here, just so you can kind of see it. But you get the picture. You got waters above the heaven. You got waters below the heaven. That is, and then in the middle you've got sky between the two. That's our second day. Now the third day, the waters are gathered together in one place and dry land appears. And then you have plants that grow on the grass and the dry land. So let me, we'll do brown here to have dry land. Okay. So we'll put brown in the center in this Vessia Pisces. We have the waters are gathered together in one place. You have seas. You have the dry land here, and then you have plants that grow upon the dry land. Okay. That is our third day. All right. Fourth day. What do you have in the fourth day? Well, you have the sun, the moon, and the stars. Okay. So you have the heavenly bodies, the heavenly lights, So again, this is we'll do these as kind of lights here. So you have the sun. We'll do the sun as the upper part of the Vesica Pisces here. We need white here, so we'll do, you have the moon and the stars down here. Oops. Alright, so we've got, let's say this is night. So we got the sun, the moon, and then the stars. Okay, kind of in the middle here. That's the evening, the morning, the fourth day. On the fifth day, we will do this with kind of a bluish color here. You've got the birds in the air, okay, that are created, and then you got the fish in the sea. Okay, so that is the fifth day. And then the sixth day, you've got creeping things that crawl underneath the earth, okay, snakes and worms and bugs or things that crawl on the earth. Then you've got animals, which are at another level, and then the highest level is you've got man, okay. I'm just going to represent it by, blood, basically, designating animals and so forth. So, and man, that is the sixth day. And then God creates man, male, and female, and they rule and they subdue over the earth. They're the last one. Now, the seventh day is the whole thing, okay? This is the day of rest. Akin to the very first emptiness, because you have the basically time starting before the seventh day. So it's that inner dot is the same thing as this outer dot in a sense, because if you remember, when we start with this is the same as the magnification of it. So that first non-day, if you will, is the same as the manifestation of the ultimate seventh day, which is the day of rest, which creates an empty rest for the completion of the whole. So anyways, and that is the creation of the heavens and the earth all in one day. So now, here's some things I want you to notice. Okay. The first day, which is here, which is light. On the opposite end of that spectrum, you have the things that govern light: the sun, the moon, the stars. Okay. So if we think of those manifestations as particles, okay. So the sun, the moon, the stars, that's the particles. And the light, we can think of that as the waves. The wave aspect of light. Okay, just the general existence of light overall, the creation of light. It isn't organized into particles yet, but light does exist. In the beginning, God created heavens and the earth. The earth was without form or void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, let there be light. Just the wave nature of light, the general essence of light, wasn't manifest yet into particles yet, into actual sun, moon, stars, etc. Okay, wave and particle. If you remember our electromagnetic spectrum, wave and particle, it goes back and forth between the other. That's the aspect of time. Okay, so the beats of time, if you will. Okay, so you have light is wave, light existing in particles, sun, moon, stars. Let's go to day 2. The opposite of day 2, we have the fishes in the sea and the birds in the air. Which is day 5. On day 2, we have the heavens created, which separates the waters above from the waters below. The heavens, the air, is the wave aspect of sky. Okay, it's the medium. The wave being the medium, the particle traveling along the medium, but the wave being the medium. So the heavens is the wave aspect. That's the sky. The waters below and the waters above and the waters below, those are the wave aspect of water. Okay, what do we have at the opposite end of spectrum here in the particles? The manifestation of the bits and the pieces. Okay, you have birds in the air, which would be the particles, if you will, of the things of the sky, and you have fishes in the sea, which would be the particles of the fishes under the water, the above and the below. Again, particle wave, another aspect. Now, what do we have for the nature of man and animals and land, the day 3, the land and the plants and everything? So the waters are gathered together in one place. dry land appears, dry land being the medium of life, of humanity, because life comes out of that medium, out of dry land. And then you have plants and animals that grow out of that land, out of that soil. So this is the medium, the wave, if you will, the wave aspect of it. And at the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the particle aspect of it. If a pile of sand, with ripples in it, out in a desert, like you've seen that before on when sand piles up and the wind sweeps it, and you can see all the ripples that kind of grow in a desert area over sand. If that dry, empty sand is the wave aspect of it, and then God creates man and animals out of that dirt, out of that sand, that empty dryness, these are the particle aspect, that wave aspect of nature. And then you have life, you have the growth of plants, and then you have which is the flourishing, the wave aspect of life, if you will, with the spreading out of wheat fields, of air flowing through it, and so forth. And then on the other opposite end of it, you have the animals that eat that life, and then man that eats both the fruit and the green things and the fruit, whereas the animals just eat the fruit. So you have two types of trees that grow here. You have the fruit, which is for man, and then you have the green aspects, which is for the animals and man. And then over here you have the consumers of those things, the particle aspects. So every aspect of this is, as you can see, is one counterpart of the other. Now, if you look at this symbol here, what does this symbol make? It makes the chi-rho. And I'll show you here in just a second what that was in terms of, let's see here, the Vessia Pisces. Chi-rho. Now that's the symbol that, here it is here, okay, that's one example of it. The other example of it is the Jesus fish, if you will, the ichthos that I talked about earlier. Here, this is an ancient Roman representation of it. IXO. It stands for Jesus Christ. Hang on one second here. Let me go back to the original. Let's see. It's iota chi theta epsilon sigma. Jesus Christ, God, Son, Savior. This is an ancient symbol going back to the early Christian church, not long after Christianity spread into the Roman Empire, showing this particular symbol. And this is the chi-rho symbol as well. Ichthos, that's the name for it. You see it on the back end of bumper stickers, but all those letters can be put together to create the chi-rho. Hang on a second, I'm trying to find the... Well, you see the circle symbol here, okay? If I type in chi-rho, you'll see that same example. I think I can also, here it is here. Just put a circle around it, and then instead of like the R here, which is a P in Latin, you can still form it, the IX monogram, if you will. It's the same thing, same aspect here. Here's you make the P like this. Okay, that's the chi-rho. So getting back to, here it is here. This is the chi-rho. Okay, there's the P, X, whole thing. Explains creation, basically. Now, I don't know if the early church, if this is what they were looking at when they were dealing with all these things, like the ichthos, the fish symbol, if they were using it in the same representation, but it does seem to fit, in my opinion, very well. So that's one possibility, but that is looking at the aspects of creation in the first chapter of Genesis. The Hebrew letters, I want to get into that a little bit too. Hold on a second here. Okay, so as I said, the Hebrew letters, we have Bereshit, Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yod, and Tav. Okay, Bereshit. In the beginning. We're just going to look at just this one first word in Genesis. We already mentioned B comes from the Egyptian hieroglyph meaning body. Okay. Ra means head, starting point. Okay. Or Resh rather. But when we have an Aleph with that, which is magnification I'm sorry, hang on one second here. I want to draw this in ancient hieroglyphic form, sort of. The early depiction of the letter A is the head of an ox. That's, believe it or not, this A with the two horns this is the head. These are the two horns here. That's where that came from. They just kind of turned it around and became the letter A. So the resh, that was a head. The body here, that was the bet, the house. That's where our letters actually come from. So the ox, the head, the starting point. Okay. That is magnification that manifests itself. Ra is the head, so we have the head here, right? Resh, the starting point of magnification. That's what Ra is. And what does that mean? That means to make void or empty or to lay waste. Because what it's referring to is it's that recombination of two substances. If you bring it back together, you're making it void and empty. Okay, that's what Ra is. It's going back to that original starting point. It's uncreating. Okay, the body is the container that's creating it. Okay, or that's creating that's the outer manifestation here. That's the substance. So bara means to both create a body for something and to make it void. You're separating it into these two aspects, ba and ra, the body and the void. Okay. So sheet, barashit. Okay, this is interesting too. This is the same core word for Seth, which was the name of Adam's son that God gave to replace Abel after Cain killed him. So they would have basically a replacement son, and that the essence of the term in Hebrew is replacement. I can show you that here just one second. So let's go to Seth. Let's look up the word Seth. Okay, we're getting a little ahead in the chapters here, but I think it's important to look at it. Sheath. For God has said he had appointed, he had set, in a sense. That's what it means. It means to set something else in place of. Okay. And Adam knew his wife, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. And they're going to explain why they should call him Seth right here. For God said he hath appointed, or sheath, me another instead of Abel whom Cain slew. Okay? So that's what Seth is. It's sheath. It's a derivation of the word sheath in the sense of berashith or bereshit. To put, to set, to put, to lay a hand upon, to set, station, to fix upon. Now remember what we were talking about with the compass, fixing it on a point in order to begin the aspects of creation. Set, a point. Literally a point. It says, for she hath appointed to set. Okay. Here we have the divine aspect of what we're doing here in terms of creation. Oops. Hang on a second. So we have a body and a void. That's our circle, literally. Whoops. Hang on. Okay. So better means to create. Seth means a point, or in place of. Literally, create a point. Better sheet in the beginning, create a point. I mean, it's right there. So, anyways, but let's break down the word Seth a little bit so we can kind of look at some of the aspects of Seth, or SYT, Shin Yod Tov. So let me select all here, and we will clear this stuff. Okay. All right. So we're going to look at the last part of the word better sheet. Okay. Shin. It can mean tooth. They're not quite sure what shin is in terms of Hebrew hieroglyphs. One think it's a symbol like this that means a tooth, basically. That kind of looks like teeth. They think that somehow the S came from kind of the curvature of this, but that it was originally a hieroglyph for a tooth. Another is that it might be a sort of a compound bow. So if you can kind of see the S aspect here, and then it's a bow, like a bow shooting a bow and arrow kind of thing. That's another conjecture. I kind of like that aspect better than the tooth one, although there are certain elements why that would work for shin for tooth. But why I think it's more of a compound bow is because shin, the character of this letter, the essence of it is kind of the sense of sending forth, like an arrow, shooting out, okay? Or another way to say it is to shine outward, to shoot out, to send, that's kind of the nature of it, okay? The shin. A yod, that comes from a hieroglyphic symbol for an arm, okay? So if you can imagine a hand here, okay, so that's a yod. Now, the interesting thing about a yod in an arm is the way they would measure things in ancient times is obviously they would use different parts of the body. Like for example, today if we say something is 20 feet tall, okay, the reason why it's called feet is because that's the average 12 inches because it's considered the average length of a foot. That's where they get the name foot from. So if you ever heard the term, a horse would be measured in hands, okay, literally you would measure it based on parts of the body. So one of the lengths of the measure that they had in ancient times was something called a cubit. And a cubit was approximately, it varied from area to area, but it was approximately 18 inches. But it was basically the length from your elbow to the tip of your fingers. And that was your measurement of length. So yod is the symbol of an arm. It means basically length, okay? So we have shining outward, we have length or distance or a measurement of empty space, okay? And then tov is basically a mark. It's a sign. It's kind of an endpoint. It's the manifestation of something. There's something in Hebrew called, that we don't really translate into English, but it's called et. So Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et eretz. Ha-eretz. So in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So Bereshit means in the beginning. Bara means created. Elohim is the word for God. Ha means the, so it's ha shamayim. Shamayim means heavens, so the heavens. And then we have, so et ha shamayim. Et doesn't really translate, okay? It's eth or et. You could think of it as like the ethos of something. So et. Et hashamim va et haaretz. Now haaretz is the earth. Ha is the, eretz is earth. So et haaretz, we don't translate et in English, but basically it's the endpoint, it's the manifestation, it's the object of your sentence. So if we say in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, when we say God created, eth designates what it is that you're going to say is creating. So eth hashamin is designating the sign, the manifestation of heaven, and eth haaretz means the sign or the manifestation of earth. So that's what, in a sense, eth is kind of the particle to the wave. The verb or the action is the wave form, the energy of it. The particle form is the F, the manifestation where the wave ends up being a particle. Okay. Solidified in its nature. It's no longer, it's measured, it's no longer something that's a wave of probability. It's now become a manifest particle. It's measured, it's set in stone, if you will. Okay, that's the endpoint, the F, the mark. So let me select all here and undo this. So getting back to where I was saying with the word better sheet in the beginning. Okay. Seth, better sheet. So we have shine. Now, in the beginning, God created. So we have created here a body and a void. Okay. So we start with our point becomes body and a void. Essence is shining forth. Okay. Almost like our A here. Okay. Shining. You start from a starting point. You're shining forth. Okay. Barashit. And the point that you're starting, the barashit, the point of creation that you're starting to shine forth from, you have space separated by yad, a length measurement, space measurement of time, measurement to separate the two, division in between the two. And then you have the manifestation point. In the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. The earth shine, the heavens shine. The earth is a place of energy, a wave, or the heavens rather is a place of energy, a wave, the emittance of light. The earth, the particle, the manifestation of it is the receptor of it. Okay, the shining forth of creation into the earth, and then it's separated by time and space. That's the void that the barrier between the two. Better sheet. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Earth. F. Okay, the Hebrew word for light is or. That's how it's pronounced. It's basically aleph, vav, which is kind of a V, and resh, or, but it's pronounced or. Okay. Vav is the hieroglyph for it is basically a nail or a hook, a spike. Okay, and it's designed. The way it works is it's connecting. So you connect two things. You have something here, you have something here. They're nailed together. So in English, it's used as the word and, basically. So if I say this and that, in Hebrew, it would be like saying this, that. You use the word va instead of and. It's a connecting point between the two. So aleph and the resh connected together is light. Aleph is the magnification, time, space-time, and resh is the starting point, if you will, the point. So the particle of space and time recombinated, connected together, that's the essence of light, particle and wave, all in one object, if you will. Okay, that's or. It's pronounced or. Now, Earth, in a sense, is made up of those two sections. The eth, okay, that's your endpoint, your manifestation, and your or is your light. That shines to the endpoint, the receptor, the manifestation of it. Shining down, if you will, onto the earth. Your starting point, Father in heaven, shining down onto the end point, the earth. That's the urith. Urith, earth. That makes sense. So anyways, so the better sheet, shining in heaven, separated by the manifestation on earth. Doesn't have to be on earth in terms of sheet. Separated by time and space, the division of these two together. So magnified space. So if we look at our magnification here, okay, here's the shining part. Here is the separation part, okay, and the eth actually manifests into its counterparts. It's contradictory if you have light and darkness, day and night, and so forth. So you start with your magnification, your starting point. From there, you shine, you progress, okay, and raise, if you will. The rays are separated by the y. So here your starting point, shining, separation, manifestation. Now the Seth part, you have two manifestations. You have because you have to have polar opposites in order for existence to occur. Even if it's the body and the void, you have to have, if it's light and dark, if it's water and sky, in order for exist, it has to be connected between two different elements that are contradictory. So therefore, you actually have an eth here, manifestation point, completion and endpoint, and then you have an eth here. Now it's interesting to note that in Hebrew, in Greek we say that Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega. In Hebrew, the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the Tov. So it's the Aleph and the Tov. Not the we call our alphabet about the AB alphabet. In Hebrew, it's the Aleph Tov. So because it's the first letter and the last letter, the alpha. It wouldn't be the Alpha and Omega like Greek, where the last letter is 0. In Hebrew, it's the mark, the sign. That's the last letter. So you start with a starting point, you magnify all the way down to the end point, the last point. Which brings up kind of another interesting point here. So before I get to that, so if you have two eths, you have a darkness and a light. Now Seth was in place of, and he's in place of what? He's in place of something that was killed or destroyed, that being Abel. That's where Abel, the word Abel means God is my father, basically. Ab is father, and El is the word for God. So Abel, Abba means father. Abel means God is my father, basically. So Abel was a son of God, because it says God is his father, and he was destroyed so that Seth might exist or live. Jesus died that we might live. You know, look at this another example here. Here's the dot. Okay, the dot, the starting point, God basically, in order that this magnification occurs, you have to have the void in the middle. You have to have the outer body, but the two are actually one entity. So the center point disappears, so the void can exist and the body can exist. Okay, that's kind of the essence of the same thing that's happening here in terms of Seth. Seth did not exist, and none of us would exist if Abel existed, because the only reason Seth existed was as a replacement for Abel. Okay. So just kind of an interesting thought there. Another thing, hang on a second here. Select all. Delete. Okay. Sin is the translation of sin for the Hebrew word is it basically means missing the mark. Kind of like if you shot an arrow at a target and you kind of missed it. But another way to look at it, a mark, again, is a tov. That's the mark. And the Aleph, that's an ox. The original, remember I said the original symbol for Aleph was an ox? Okay. In ancient times, they would plow their fields with oxes. They didn't use horses. And the way they would do this, if you're going to create a furrow, you would place a mark at the other end, and you would plow your ox towards the furrow, okay, towards the mark. Now, if you got off course as you're plowing your field, you want to have nice straight parallel lines, right? Each time you're going towards that mark. But if you got off course, what's going to happen to your field? It ain't going to work, is it? Your furrowed lines are going to be all over the place. So sin is described as you're going towards the mark, okay? In this case, the cross, the tov. And sin is if you depart to the right or the left, if you miss the mark. Get it? So you're plowing with your ox and you miss the mark, because at this act is an act of magnification. Okay, you can start out very small, but as you magnify, as you move along here, your chances of getting off course, just like if you were to nudge say an asteroid that's floating through space, you might just touch it a little tiny bit and it might go off course just a little bit starting out, but by the time it goes millions and millions of miles, it could be way off course. That's the power of magnification. So the aleph, the ox, it's very easy to get off the mark. That's what sin is, and that's the what do you call it? The challenge of overcoming sin throughout time is staying on that highway, that straight path, and not falling off to the left or the right as we progress towards the mark. So anyways, that's Bereshit in the beginning. Now, some other interesting points about this. These aren't the only combinations for these particular letters. Like, for example, BR. That is bar, which means son. Okay. Simon Bar Jonah, son of Jonah. Bar is a Hebrew word which means son. Kind of interesting. Esh. First of all, I said the Resh was a head. That's father, chief, starting point. Okay. Let's see. Esh, A-S, that's that in Hebrew. Again, there's no vowels in Hebrew, but so A could be E, could be kind of serve as the vowel, but the word Esh in Hebrew, which is Aleph and the Shin and so forth, that actually means fire, or Ish. For example, in a name for man, one of the names for man is Ish, and Eve was called Isha because she was taken out of man. They add an AH at the end of it here. Ish can mean man, and Isha means woman, but Esh, another variation of that, can mean fire, and so Isha means taken out of the fire, taken out of the flames. The name of Jesus in Hebrew is Yeshua, from where we get the word Jesus. Okay. So if we break this down here, Yah is a name for God. Okay. And if you remember here from Yod, separation, space, Ish, fire, and out of. God takes us out of the flames. Kind of interesting, huh? Yeshua. It's all contained in the first letters. There's other stuff I can go into here too. If you get into the first verses of Genesis, and I'll go into that, but there's a lot of stuff that predicts the coming of Jesus just in the very first letters. And a lot of the first letters, like I said, Bereshit in the beginning begins to play out in the following verses when it talks about the creation of heavens and the earth and so forth. The earth was without form and void. All that is kind of contained in the letters, just like that little dot that starts out in just a small thing and it doesn't seem like anything at all, and then all of a sudden it can create that flower of life. It can create Metatron's cube, and you won't believe the kind of stuff it creates if you keep going and you keep connecting the dots. It's amazing what it'll create. For example, a compass. Okay, I can keep connecting the dots to the point where it will create a compass and it will create a square. The very tools that you would use to pivot on the dot to create that imagery, it will begin to draw those tools by connecting the dots. So that's kind of amazing too. So anyways, the Bereshit, it contains, just like this little dot can manifest into such amazing information. In the beginning, Bereshit, all these little letters, all these little words, even the shapes of the letters and everything, will begin to manifest into greater and greater aspects of the gospel. They'll actually predicate the gospel, so that different elements that are contained in the verses later are hidden within the letters ahead of time, and it will foretell the coming of those letters. That's how amazing this is. So there's no way this book is not supernatural. So I'm going on 2 hours and 40 minutes here, and I've been kind of rambling, but hopefully this kind of gives you a little taste of it, and I'll try to go on a little bit further in the upcoming videos. The next thing I'm going to do is we talk about the dichotomy between the different aspects of light and darkness, heaven and earth, and so forth. That same thing carries through into the next chapter, because the next chapter of Genesis is a dichotomy of the first chapter on purpose. And it has to do with the fact that the first chapter is dealing with kind of a wildness of creation, the exterior outside of the Garden of Eden, over the earth, whereas the second chapter deals with the creation, dealing interior to the Garden of Eden and domesticated as opposed to wild. It's the Lord God instead of just God. It's domesticated animals and plants as opposed to wild animals and plants. So there's this dichotomy then you have between authority and outside of the authority God, inside the garden versus outside of the garden, chaos versus order. That's between the two chapters. And then you get into the third chapter, and that is basically Satan's challenge between those two dichotomies, to try to tempt man to make a choice. And man fails and is cast out of the garden. But we'll get into that in the future chapters. So for now, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Okay, thanks.